Not too far from the east end of Loch Assynt in Sutherland, a short distance from the village of Inchnadamf, stands the ruins of Ardvreck Castle and Calda House. In the old castle lived Neil MacLeod, the Laird of Ardvreck, whose wife apprehended James Graham, the Marquis of Montrose, and imprisoned him in his keep. The castle was built towards the end of the 16th century, on the neck of a long rocky peninsula on the northeast side of the loch that protrudes into it, around 1.5 miles from its head. The other building is Calda, better known as Calda House, which stands at the southeasterly point of the loch. It was erected in 1660 by Kenneth Mackenzie, 3rd Earl of Seaforth. The house was destroyed by fire in the mid-1800s. The Seaforth estate was forfeited but purchased in 1758 by William Sutherland, the 18th Earl of Sutherland. The remains of Ardvreck are fragmentary, but it can be seen that it was a simple keep with a round staircase tower to its southeast, corbelled out on the upper floors to form square rooms. There was also a small stair in the turret leading up to the upper rooms. The ground floor was divided into 3 compartments, all of which were vaulted. The one on the far side was not more than a small passage, 3 feet 9 inches wide, leading from where the entrance door would have opened into it, most likely from the east. From there, this gave passage to the other vaults and to the staircase. From the loopholes pierced in the south wall, the passage was also evidently to be used defensively. It appears there were 4 stories above the basement. The first would have been the Grand Hall, which was accessed by a large wheel staircase in an angled tower. There is evidence that this floor was also vaulted, with the upper floors simply joisted. There is no trace of the north wall, however there are traces of stone walls to the east and south of the castle, perhaps once walls of an outer court. To the north, there were also traces of another strong wall, but this is now under water. The iron cannon that once defended it were removed to Loch Inver for their preservation. On 27th April 1650, the nobleman, poet and soldier of repute, James Graham, the first Marquis of Montrose, who was fighting for the royalist cause, lost the Battle of Carbisdale to a substantially smaller Covenanter army led by Colonel Archibald Strachan, and fled. He arrived at Ardvreck 2 days later, where he hoped to find sanctuary. Neil MacLeod was away at the time, but his wife Christine was there and tricked him, leading him down into the dungeons, where she imprisoned him. Government troops were sent for, and he was taken to Edinburgh, where he was executed on 21st May. His head was placed on a spike at the toll booth outside St Giles Cathedral, where it remained until early 1661. On 7th January, his remains were exhumed. His limbs, sent to Perth, Stirling, Glasgow and Aberdeen, were returned, although his right arm, sent to Dundee, wasn't, as it had been taken to England, and his head removed from the spike. He was reinterred at St Giles. Why she did this is unclear, although some believe it was due to the substantial reward for his capture. In the end, MacLeod received 40 balls of oatmeal. The betrayal of Montrose has been seen by many as the Highlands' darkest hour. Shortly after, the Royalists took control with the restoration of Charles II in 1660. This led to the MacLeods being shunned. As debtors called in their loans, they were forced to sell their lands, with the Mackenzies purchasing Ardvreck Castle. However, the MacLeods refused to acknowledge their legal right to the castle and refused to vacate it. A siege began and lasted for a fortnight, and when the Mackenzies brought in their firepower, the MacLeods finally left. In 1672, the castle was attacked by the Mackenzies of Assynt. They captured it and held on to it for over 70 years. In 1726, the Mackenzies built Calda House to replace the ageing castle. It's said they even used stone from the old castle to build it. The castle is said to be haunted, and there are tales of a man in grey wandering round its lands, and a weeping girl, said to be the daughter of a MacLeod chief. A deal had been made between her father and the devil to marry his dark majesty in exchange for keeping the castle safe. Beside herself, she jumped from a high window into the loch and drowned. As for the grey man, one moonlit night, two crofters were on their way home to Elphin, walking a cow along the road, and as they approached Ardvreck, they saw a tall grey figure. The ghostly figure spoke to them in Gaelic, remarking, "It's a fine night." One of them began chatting away to the ghost as it accompanied them for a mile or so along the road, until it simply disappeared. Calda House is also in a very ruinous state, caused by the devastating fire in 1737. It remains a mystery as to how the fire started. The Mackenzies intended to rebuild it, but they had their lands confiscated by the Crown after the 1745 Jacobite uprising, when they supported the Stuart cause. It has been a ruin ever since. However, its general plan can be ascertained. It's rectangular in shape, divided into two by a longitudinal wall right down its centre. This makes it a double house, with rooms lit by windows on only one side. Each part had a separate roof, forming a double gable at each end. It stands at 2 stories with an attic, and each half of the divided house was split into 3 compartments, providing 5 apartments, with a central staircase on each floor. The chimneys were arranged for this strange division of the property, with one at each gable end on every floor, and several in the central stack. When the writer John Sinclair saw Calda, he described it as huge, ungainly, roofless, with double gables and a hideous chimney stack. He went on to say that the only pity was that when whoever set the place on fire, he was not able to sweep its very remains out of sight. No wonder that the Quinnig every day frowns down upon them in his anger. In contrast, he said that Ardvreck was attractive, stately ruins. Ghostly sightings have been seen at Ardvreck. Strange lights have been reported over the years, and a mysterious woman has been seen wandering within its ruins. Ardvreck was supposedly inhabited, at least until the 1770s, when the old dowager was said to still live there. Stories say she was a wicked woman, and one of them concerns a young family. She raised doubts in the young man's mind that his wife had been unfaithful, and that the child wasn't his. The poor woman was beside herself, as she repeatedly told him it was untrue, so much so she wrote to her 2 brothers to come to the house. But still her husband didn't believe her. They suggested going to see the old woman the next day. They arrived at Ardvreck the following day, and the old woman greeted them kindly. They were all seated in the hall within the castle, but by then it had no glass in the windows. The younger brother suddenly rose from his seat and began to write on the floor with his finger, and muttered in a strange language. As he wrote and muttered, the waters of the loch began to swell, and a mist arose. A tall black figure was then seen standing by the wall. The brother told the husband to ask his question to the ghostly figure, but to do so quickly. The man asked if his wife had been faithful, to which it replied, yes. Then a large wave crashed against the castle and crashed through the window openings. A storm raged, and the brother told the woman the apparition wouldn't leave until he had his booneth. The old woman opened the door, and a little serving girl entered, and she pointed at it. "No, not the orphan," cried the apparition. "I dare not take her." Another wave crashed in, and the elder brother called, "Take the old witch herself." "She is mine already," the figure replied. "I take with me one whom your sister will miss more," then disappeared. When the three men returned to the house, they found that her baby had died at the same instant the ghost had disappeared. For 5 years after this, the Graham produced an Assynt turned black, and the herrings no longer came to the loch. It was said fire consumed the castle and the old lady with it, and things returned to normal. The crops flourished, and the herrings returned. This tale of the crops stems from the poor harvests in the late 1690s, due to it being a cold decade in the country. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.